Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm your host, Kerry Simmons, and welcome to Everyday Eerie, the podcast where the ordinary meets the extraordinary. Dive into the world of ghost stories, haunted objects, eerie places, and unsolved mysteries that will send shivers down your spine. Each week, we explore the tales that blur the line between the living and the dead, the known and the unknown. So turn down the lights, settle in, and prepare to be spooked. So this episode is also going to feature some personal stories. So these are actually personal stories that were sent to me by my sister. So there are quite a few there because there's the house that we lived in when we were really, really young in Summerville, South Carolina was very sketchy. We are pretty positive that we could say that it was a legitimate haunted house. I was just a baby at the time. The house that I discussed in my last story in Florida, this is a house that we had lived in prior to that. So my sister was 7 years older than me. My brother's about 5 years older than me. So they remember this house quite a bit more than I do. And so they both had, some various experiences here. So these are going to be some stories, not just with the house, but there are a good few here because there are a couple related to the house and a couple that are just general weird happenings. So I'm going to read them from her point of view. Now, the first one is a little bit more of a happy, sweet story. So as a little girl, age 5, I prayed and prayed that I would see an angel after a few weeks of watching the movie Date with an Angel. It was the 80s, early 90s. Now, I prayed hard every single night that Jesus would show me a real angel. And being a child, I was absolutely certain my prayers were heard and that they would be answered. I had zero doubts, no doubts at all. So one night, I remember I fell asleep very quickly. And all of a sudden, I had this really weird feeling of floating. I was very much aware, and when I stopped floating, I felt someone take my hand. And I was positive that it was Jesus. I just knew. I saw his hand in mine, and it seemed very tan and strong with long fingers. He was wearing white, and for some reason, though, I was not allowed to look at his face. I looked down, and I realized I could see my entire development where I lived. I saw my house down below, and suddenly I got afraid. Fear came over me as I realized how high I actually was. And then I heard this voice say, "Honey, don't be afraid." And that is all that was said, and I instantly felt at peace. Now, we stood there for a minute, and he excitedly said, look, Aaron, look." And as I looked in the horizon where the sun was coming up, which meant I had to have slept a whole night before this experience, I saw an angel. This angel flew from right to left in my frame of vision, and I knew it was real because no human could fly so completely flat. Our backs would be more curved. It had wings, and its wings were huge and pure white, and she was holding a trumpet that was straight out of her mouth. She had blonde, wavy hair, and I realized that this had to be a herald angel. What was so amazing was just how excited Jesus seemed to be to show me God's creation. It was like a little kid showing off another entity that was very special. It was incredible, and I will never forget his voice and his hand. So that's a really cool story. I'm definitely a huge believer in the innocence of children. I really, really think that they have gifts that we don't have. I think that we need to take them a little bit more seriously when they tell us that they're experiencing something or that they see something, or when they know something about someone who maybe has passed, because I just really think that children don't quite yet have the ability to lie about those things or make up those things. Half the time, we're not exposing them to anything that would enhance their imagination in this kind of way where they can really kind of frame an experience like this. This is really intricate and like a deep experience. So whether or not it happens in the physical world or if it happens in almost more of like a dreamlike state, I think that kids could definitely experience these things. And I think that there's a special precedent given to kids when they ask for these things and like in this situation. So that's really cool. It's a really cute story. All right, so the next one, we lived in a house that we believed to have been haunted in South Carolina. We found out later that the property had a burial ground on site, though most of this land had seen a lot of history between the Revolutionary and the Civil Wars. Now, when I was 5, I was playing in my room with my Barbies with the door slightly open. From the bedroom, you could see down the hallway. And now as I was playing, something suddenly caught my eye. Now, looking out the door and into the hallway, I saw this black, shadowy figure on the wall. It was very tall and looked like it was trying to mimic like a normal shadow on the wall. This tall figure looked to be a man with a top hat on, almost looking like what you expect a shadow of Abraham Lincoln to look like, as funny as that sounds. But the way he was almost trying to hide himself, yet show himself just enough, made me feel really creeped out. I remember throwing my Barbie and running downstairs where my grandmother, who lived with us, was, and I never slept in that room again. Now, in the same house, one night, while I was in my grandma's room watching TV, Nick at Night, to be exact, while she was laying on her side reading, the door to the bedroom, which had been just slightly open, creeped open a bit more. Now, because of previous experiences in the house, this put us on really high alert. Now, she had one of those old TVs where you actually had to like pull in and push in and pull out the button or the knob to get it to turn off or on. And it was like a thick button. I mean, you had to really push it in and pull it out with a decent bit of force to get it to work. Well, this button at this time was pushing in and out on its own, shutting off and turning on the TV. Now, at this point, my nanny grandma, who was relatively fearless, felt that something was not right, and she began to pray in Spanish. And this is when all the activity ceased and the rest of the night remained peaceful. Yeah, she was totally fearless for the most part, but she would have these incidences where like we would come home and she would just be like, oh, muchas fantasmas, like the house had been going AWOL, you know, while she was there by herself. So I could definitely see this happening. We all used to sleep in her room quite frequently, and I think, you know, living in this house, again, I was a baby, so I was, you know, somewhere in my crib, blissfully unaware. But for my sister and brother, they would sleep in her room often because they were really freaked out by their rooms. So this was one of the experiences they had in my nan's room. Now, the same house, we had cousins that were coming to stay with us from up north. And myself and my cousin, who is around the same age as I am, were downstairs with the grown-ups, and my sister, and this is again kind of from her point of view, so she says myself, my brother and cousin went upstairs to watch Hook in our grandma's room, and this is the same room from the previous story. And as we watched, we closed the door to our room because the hallway was always a little weird, gave us a little creepy feeling. Now, just as a scene in the movie took a turn, there were 3 loud bangs on the door, and me being the oldest jumped up because I thought Nanny wanted into her room. So I swung the door open, and the hallway was really dark and quiet. Now, for anyone, especially an adult, to have done this, they would have had to have run incredibly fast without making a sound down the stairs, up the hallway, and it was totally silent. So I went downstairs to ask if anyone had been upstairs, and everyone looked at me like I had 9 heads and said no. So I went back up to get the younger boys, and we all went downstairs until bedtime because now at this point we were all spooked and we knew it was a ghost. And then again, in the same house, we would often hear what sounded like kids running up and down the stairs and toilets flushing without anyone in the bathrooms. At some point, my parents heard what sounded like glass breaking, like dishes breaking, and thought that it was like an intruder, only to find absolutely nothing broken. there were quite a few experiences of seeing like a shadow figure. My brother would see a shadow figure while he was playing with his toys in my dad's office room. So just really, really creepy. A lot of strange things would happen in that house. So now we're moving on to some stories that were just kind of weird, not really related to that house anymore. So again, from her point of view, one time we all went as a family to the mall, and when we decided to go home, since our nanny was sick at the time and couldn't really leave the house too much, we would always bring her back something from Dr. Desserts. Dr. Desserts was this dessert place that was right up the road in a plaza near the subway. And the subway was kind of like the hangout spot. So that's where we always went to hang out with friends. And I decided, well, since we're going to be there, I'd go to the subway and see if any of my friends were there while the rest of the family were getting desserts for home. Mom and Dad said, yes, just be quick about it. And I said, sure. So once I started walking, I looked at my left, and there was always a store that was like ever evolving. It was a skate shop. It was a toy store. It was a clothes store, and it never could stay open. And I know the store that she's talking about, and she's absolutely right. It was just like weird. Everything else in the plaza did just fine. It was just this in particular, no matter what entered into this storefront, nothing could stay open. Nothing did well there. It just kept revolving. It was almost like something was kicking people out. So all of a sudden there was a car noise, and there were a ton of people, and then things went silent, and there was no more noise. And there was no more people. And it was myself and this store. And as I looked to my left into the store, all of a sudden, the once dark store that was being renovated yet again now had the light on, and I see a man looking at me through the window. He was tall, and he was tan and smiling at me with a very white and cream-colored suit. What I noticed the most about him was that, first of all, I had no fear seeing him. Secondly, the suit was odd. There was a large button on the left side of the suit with a flap that connected one side of the suit to the other. It was a regular button-down suit other than that. And also the fact that he was very, very, very tall. He seemed to be around 6'5" or 6'7", but I felt absolutely no fear. And then as soon as it happened, as I'm starting to get comfortable, I hear the noise around us again. The place went dark, and he seemed to just disappear. And I ran back to tell the family, and of course everyone probably thought I was crazy, but it definitely happened, and I'm not sure who this man was. So sort of like, well, this is a lot less scary than in my mind what happened with the mom situation in the story I told last time, because I've freaked myself out about that story one too many times. But similar to that, who was this person? Could this person have been a past family member? It's interesting because, we think to ourselves, would we have had a relationship with these people, and that's what would drive them to come back to us and make an appearance to us. But at the same time, could it be an ancestor that maybe we've never met? Someone that is maybe connected to us in certain ways through the things we like and the way that we look? We never know exactly. Could this have just been a spirit? It seemed like it wanted to show itself to my sister specifically. I don't know that I would believe it'd be the same thing or entity that was seeming to like kick out every other storefront that came in. You would almost imagine that when that's the case, it's something that's a little bit more evil in nature, but this seemed like a harmless, not fearful, kind of peaceful situation. So it's very individualized. It's like this, this was specifically happening for my sister. And so we wonder, at least I do, ancestors that never have met us before, we're still connected. We're connected somewhere along the tree, right? If you think of a huge tree with a bunch of branches, there are roots, there's a trunk, there are branches going out every which way, but somehow we are connected, and maybe in more ways than we think. So that's an interesting story. Now the next one, when I was 16, Mom and Dad finally let my best friend and I go to the mall with her then escort car. So it was a white one. We were super excited. We put on our seatbelts, we put the car in the reverse. And as soon as I put the car in reverse, I see this guy behind us that I can still see through the rear view mirror in my mind. He had really bright blue eyes. He was freckled. He was a redhead. He had buzzed hair. And he was wearing a red polo and a large gold cross around his neck. And I thought I hit him. He was so close to the car, but I didn't feel the car get hit. But I felt in my heart that I may have hit him. So I jumped out of the car after putting it in park, and he was totally gone. There was nobody there. And with the little kind of cul-de-sac, the little bend that we lived in our neighborhood, there's nowhere that he could have gone that he wouldn't have been seen. Even if he ran through the sides of the house, he would have been heard and seen somewhere, especially with how close he was to the car. The funny thing about it is that my best friend thought he was looking at her through the side mirror, and I thought he was looking right at me through the rear view mirror. So what we think happened is that an angel may have been stopping us because we were so excited about our first time going somewhere alone that we could have gotten into an accident or something. It was amazing, and I really just still see him in my mind. So that's super cool too. And yeah, I am the first one to get really pissed off when I'm like stuck in traffic, or when I get out to my car like to leave for work and I realize, shit, I forgot my lunch, I forgot my coffee, I forgot my phone charger, or whatever it is. I get super pissed off, but I think that sometimes in those situations we have to stop and remind ourselves maybe there's a reason and kind of let it go. You know what I mean? It's sort of like the butterfly effect kind of thing. Like you never know. You never know when you're being saved from something. You never know when an inconvenience is actually like a master plan to keep you safe, or to prevent something from happening, or to make sure that you're put in the appropriate place at the right time. So that could have definitely been what happened there. So those stories were super interesting, super fun. Don't forget to check me out on Instagram to see the pictures that I have posted that'll kind of coincide with the stories. Obviously, where applicable, the personal stories aren't going to have pictures associated with them, but I'll try and post some other creepy things during those episode releases as well. And then don't forget, I'm taking personal stories from anybody. So if you have any spooky story that you want to share for me to read on the podcast, you can email them to me at everydayeerie26@gmail.com. Otherwise, thank you for joining me on this journey into the eerie and unexplained. I hope these stories captivated your imagination and that you will join me next time for more tales of the strange and supernatural. Until then, keep an eye out for the eerie in your everyday.